Ladies and gentlemen, I've discovered what the great explorer Juan Ponce de Leon never could. I've unlocked the secrets of the Fountain of Youth, and I cannot wait to tell you about it. Thank you very much. Good night. Shortest TEDx ever. But in all seriousness, before I can tell you about the secrets to a longer and more joy-filled life, I have to tell you about where this story began for me. So I spent 9 years in the United States Marine Corps with combat deployments to Iraq in 2008 and 2009 and Afghanistan in 2010. And as they say, it was the best of times and it was the absolute worst of times. But one of those best of times days came deep into southern Helmand Province, Afghanistan on May 24th, 2010, which just so happened to be my 27th birthday. Now, our unit had been preparing for a multi-day operation deep into southern Helmand Province, Afghanistan, into some deep Taliban country. And we had spent the last few days going over every contingency imaginable, cleaning and firing our weapons more than we should, and preparing our minds for what we knew was going to be an intense couple weeks. But on the night of May 24th, my good friend, Corporal Jacob Light, presented me with a birthday cake. Now, this wasn't just any birthday cake. By a show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of MREs, meals ready to eat? Yes, a good number of us. For those of you that are unfamiliar with this tasty morsel, this is a bag of food that with enough salt to kill a horse that's meant to sustain us for an entire day. And they come on different levels. There's the individual level that comes in a little bag, and then there are big levels for chow halls. Now, what Jake did was he broke into the chow hall that morning, and he grabbed me a chocolate MRE cake. And he presented me this cake, but what he had done is he had squirted a giant number 27 on it in mayonnaise. This was my face when Jake presented me with this cake. He thought that I was just going to brush this off, slide it to the side, laugh, we'd have a good laugh, and we'd go on with the rest of our evening, but I wasn't going to let Jake win. We all know where this is going. I grabbed a handful of that chocolatey, mayonnaise-y mess right at that fat number 7, put it in my mouth, chewed it, and I looked at him, and I stood up and walked away with the confidence of a 4-star general. It was disgusting. But I wasn't going to let Jake win that day. Now, Jake and I met 9 months earlier in what I call the Pit of Destiny. Now, the Pit of Destiny is located in sunny Southern California, where we were originally based, and in the Pit of Destiny, we have what's called the ground fighting event. Now, for Marines, the ground fighting event meant that 10 Marines got on their knees in the beach in front of another 10 Marines that lined up facing those Marines. And on the count of execute, which is the same as go, we were to submit the Marine in front of us and then the rest of the 19 Marines in the pit on our way to Marine Corps glory. It looks a lot like this. Now, we just got back from Iraq, and a slew of new Marines had joined the battalion. And I had been chasing the moment of Marine Corps glory to have my hand raised at the end of this to be the last one standing for years. So I was the first one on my knees in the pit. And then an unfamiliar Marine plopped down in front of me, and I looked at him. He was 6'4", 160 pounds, soaking wet. I felt sorry for this kid. I knew I was going to make light work of him and work my way down the line to the rest of the 19 Marines, and my hand was going to be raised in glory at the end of the day. So the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, execute. I launch myself as fast and as hard as I can towards this Marine's long neck. Now, 8 to 10 seconds later, my eyeballs slowly start to blink open. My arms are like this, and I'm being carried to the back of the pit by 2 other Marines who are laughing hysterically. They get me there, they brush me off, and they collect themselves long enough to tell me that I unknowingly drew the short straw and that the Marine in front of me was an absolute stud in the Marine Corps martial arts world. So I dust myself off, I go introduce myself, and that Marine just so happened to be Jake. Now, what I learned about Jake was 2 years prior to me meeting him, before he choked me out, he had been badly injured in Iraq by an IED that shattered his entire right side of his body. And he fought like crazy to get back to a deployable unit, which was ours. I learned that he loved being a Marine, and I learned that he loved leading Marines more than anything. Over the next 9 months, we would sweat together, we would bleed together, and we would prepare for war together. So flash forward to May 25th, the day after my birthday, 2010. This operation is everything we thought it was going to be. It is so tough. And then 2 days later, I get word that Jacob's been killed by an ID only a couple miles away from where we were operating. I was devastated. How in the world could Jake be dead? I spent the next 3 weeks back on base grieving, processing, and just thinking about our time together. Now I know this is a far cry from discovering the fountain of youth, but I promise we're going to get back to it. What I uncovered over the next decade, and what I thought about, was that every mission that Jake and I went on, every training evolution, we used that information to accomplish the next mission. And we used that information to accomplish the next mission. And every time that we did that, we gained a body of knowledge that made our jobs easier and it made our lives a lot better. You see, oftentimes we can think of success as a very linear process. We think of success, we think of goal achievement as we have this point A, and that point A can be whatever you want it to be. It could be competing in a half Ironman. It could be starting a business. It could be a promotion. Whatever that is, that goal that you have. And once you attain that goal, point Z, you're done. But I found that wasn't true. What I found was that success, goal achievement, all these other things are cyclical in nature. They are not linear. And not only are they cyclical, but they are highly repeatable and they're highly consistent. So what I came up with was the life cycle of positive expansion. Now I know it says cycle of positive expansion, but the life cycle part is what we'll get into in a minute. And here's how it goes. You have your point A, you're inspired. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you were inspired by something you hear today. But my greatest hope is that you turn that inspiration and you internalize it, and that turns into motivation. Motivation is when we plan to act on something. You're motivated to become a better leader because you went to a leadership conference. You're making a plan. You've registered that LLC, you bought your business cards. Internally, you're taking steps towards doing the thing. But what's motivation without action? It's nothing. You have to act on something. So if you're training for that half Ironman, you buy new running shoes. You tune up your old road bike. For me, it was a 1985 road bike that did not work very well, but I tried. But you start doing something. But what happens when it gets really, really hard? Because you're acting off of motivation and inspiration. You want to quit. Ladies and gentlemen, self-limiting beliefs begin to creep in and you don't want to do this anymore. It is too hard. You've hit the wall. In this stage of the game, I would wager that the cure to cancer has been lost. I ran by a graveyard earlier this morning. I looked. I'm wondering how many ideas are in that graveyard that never came to fruition because they got stuck in their self-limiting beliefs. So how do you go from there's no way I can do this to not only can I do this, but I have to do this? You bring other people into your process. You start getting coached and you start learning more. You grab somebody who's done this exceptionally well and you start asking good questions. You start asking dumb questions. You learn about the process. And then once you've done that, you start to implement what you've learned, and you're no longer acting off of motivation and inspiration, but you're acting off of coaching and learning. You know what you're doing because you've been taught, and you have people in your corner now that are going to do this with you. And once you've implemented this thing based off coaching and learning, you have now reached a form of practiced discipline. This is your new operating environment. This is your new level of operation. This is just how you respond now. And then you achieve a level of success that you've been wanting. But like I said, this is not a linear process. There are times you're going to have to bounce back to inspiration and motivation, especially when you're crashing and destroying self-limiting beliefs. But what you've created here is absolutely amazing comfort zone. And it's a good thing, I promise. What you've created is a body of knowledge that you have that will allow you to move on to the next thing. You are doing this well. You know how to do it. You have people in your corner. So this is why I call it the life cycle of positive expansion, and this is where we get into the fountain of youth. According to the National Institute of Health and decades of research, the more that we stretch our minds, the more we learn, the more we try new things, the longer our brains will hold on to their cognitive functions. The longer our brains hold on to their cognitive functions, their ability to process complex information, to be able to act on curiosity, to try new things, scientifically, data proven, the longer we will live. So what we do is we take that comfort zone, go through the cycle, and we expand upon it. And we make that bigger. We do bigger and better things. And then we do the same thing, and we do bigger and better things. And at the end, you will have added 10 years to your life. That is not data. I just made that up. But science will show us that you will live longer and happier lives if you continue to build off of what you've learned and the knowledge that you have. And what the comfort zone, why I say the comfort zone gets an incredibly bad rap is because our comfort zone prepares us for bigger and better things. I had a conversation with General Petraeus a few months ago, and he was the commander of Iraq and Afghanistan and was a CIA director for a while. And he told me that luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. We have to use our comfort zones, that body of knowledge that we know, that we love, that level of discipline that we have, and we have to use that to be prepared for the opportunities that will come. Our comfort zones are awesome. Can we stay there? Absolutely not. If we want to enjoy the spoils of the fountain of youth, we have to continue to expand our mind, and it's going to be hard. Ladies and gentlemen, these seem like easy processes. But what happens when you start going uphill? When I try new things and it gets really hard, I think about being as radically committed as the American bison. Now, the American bison is the only herd animal that when a giant storm begins to form over the horizon, it will take a few bites of whatever's laying around, it'll look at its herd, and it'll go directly through the storm. Because it instinctively knows that by going through the storm, instead of around it or away from it, that it will get out on the other side healthier, and it'll have learned from the storm that they just went through. And they can use that storm to get to the next, because there will be storms that come, especially if we're expanding our minds the way that we need to. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to encourage you. Establish your comfort zones. Expand your comfort zones. And when you hit that self-limiting beliefs category, bring other people into your process. It's brave. That's how we expand. That's how we continue to grow. And not only is that how we change ourselves, that's how we change the world with the products that we're going to create, with the ideas we're going to have, with the relationships that we build. Now turn to your neighbor. This is a little bit of active participation. Turn to your neighbor and give him a high five. Say, we got this. Yeah. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, your ideas will change the world if you let them. So let's start pushing each other. Let's start coming together. And in a healthy way, let's go through the storm together. Thank you very much.